All right, so we're going to resume our discussion and move on to the next topic, which is going to be assessment of the district by a third party.
Huh?
If there is.
Oh, yeah. There we go. There you go. Thank you. All right. The next thing was assessment of by a third party process. So this is going to be a little bit different. It's not direct costing, but more of a discussion of the process and everything. So starting off again with some background. Third party assessment generally considered to be something that a third party contracted party, if you will, and it can be either public or private firm to perform agreed upon scope of work of the customer. So the key here is that the customer has a scope of work, or to find what the need is that they want to have evaluated. And then it's also important, it's also on the part of the customer, us, for example, to have a selection process to select a contractor to perform that work. The scope of work would be a defined set of issues and or interests generally on how the customer conducts their business. So, for example, we may have a desire to do something that we've never done before, or we don't have what we believe is adequate knowledge to fully evaluate the issue or the interest and so forth. So having and engaging with somebody who does, at least hopefully, have that background and knowledge and skill and so forth to do that. So examples like I mentioned here is looking at financial practices that an organization might have, compliance with industry standards, whether, as business owner, we are complying with that. Potential business interest, if we want to launch a new business like providing ambulance service, or any significant organizational changes that an organization has. So those are types of events that would typically include a third-party assessment to come in and make. And then that provider, the contractor, would need to provide a set of deliverables to the customer saying, okay, in exchange for whatever, for money or whatever, this is what I'll provide to you, just like any other service, delivering gas or buying a hamburger or whatever. But the thing is that the result of their product, their service, is not really binding on the owner. I mean, we could choose not to follow their advice or do anything with it, but we're paying them to deliver a thing that we've asked them to do. Once they've done that, they have no further obligation. So, and the important thing is that it's up to the customer, us, for example, to follow up on recommendations. I mean, we paid them to provide us with advice. It is up to us to follow that advice, but that would be one of the things that makes sense. I mean, if we've asked them for their advice, is we seriously consider it. I mean, it sounds simple, but some people lose that concept in establishing, having a consultant come in. So that all makes sense. Okay. Some historical background. We've used third-party assessments in the past. As far, probably not before the mid-90s, at least knowingly, but we've had a series of them as we move through those steps in our master planning process that we talked about earlier. Having consultants that have come in, these folks helped us with our pre-merger, post-merger, and then phases, that we've had, master planning phases that we've had. The one that was probably for me, one of the greatest helps was in '98 when we had the retired fire chief from Lacey, Neil Good, coming out, and he provided us with a discussion about formalizing our policy process, how we conducted our business, and the form that I use in our monthly reports was developed at that time. and has been used since then. So it was taking a look at our business as a series of businesses. This isn't just responding to fires, but there's administration, there's incident readiness response, there's facility equipment. I mean, there's various disparate businesses that we have to do to deliver the service of emergency response. And he helped us through that, helped us organize that. So that was, for an engineer, that was great. I loved it. I mean, he laid it all out in a logical manner that even today we continue to follow. For many years, we had an agreement with then District 7 in Lacey on what we called the Northeast Thurston Cooperative, which was managed our health and safety program. And Lacey hired an individual, very talented individual, that managed that program for several years. And really, and during that same time period, the federal government and NFPA were creating a list of regulations and consensus standards that really govern the health and safety. Big one was what's known as NFPA 1500, which was the health and safety consensus standard that NFPA promoted. Eventually led to the state vertical standards, which guide the health and safety of firefighters in the state of Washington. We had somebody come in from Department of Personnel that helped us look at our job descriptions, our reporting relationships, and several things. And Cindy Colvin did that, and it did, I think, a really good job. Set us on the track of looking at reoccurring, reasonable annual performance evaluations and things like that. That was pre-PDP, but got us moving towards that thing. Later on, we had Carnes Fain, who came in and really looked at resolving. We had, believe it or not, the organization had some significant interrelationship problems. And she came in and helped us try to give us a system and a way of helping to deal with those things. And I thought she did a pretty good job of that. And, actually, it was kind of funny because that's one of the first things, Heidi's first exposure after she came to work here was learning all the skeletons in everybody's closet.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Before I even was working,
yeah.
I was invited to the workshop and discovered that there was some animosity among a couple of the employees, and there was a lot of drama.
Yeah, there was drama.
Mhm.
Later on, we had a kind of building on that, and probably at a more group level, we had somebody come in and talk to us about our organizational effectiveness and everything. And again, it fed into the process that we later did after the merger of really looking at what we're capable of doing and forward looking on stuff like that. So I think, you know, they were fairly helpful for us in those processes. We've had other assessment, you know, third-party assessments. For example, Ellen, we've invited the Department of Labor and Industries in to take a look at our health and safety program and provide recommendations on better ways and making sure that we comply with those regulations. We've had the state auditor's office came in and looked at our financial practices and everything voluntary and provided some recommendations. We had a private individual, CPA, come in and did the same in later years. We had one time we had NFPA team. They offered an assessment team to come out and take a look at our agency on compliance with the various applicable NFPA standards. And they did, and provided us with a report. And then every 3 years or 5 years, our friends at Survey and Rating come in and take a look at us and see how good we're preventing and suppressing fires and everything. So the point is that there's a history of that engaging in those services in the district. The other thing is generally as a district, we spend the issues that we seem to not have the talent in solving in-house were obviously organizational interpersonal relations. I mean, that is such a broad encompassing subjective matter, that it really is. Sometimes it's really important that you can bring a third party, disinterested third party in to help you work through your family counseling, if you will. And, we've had cases like that. People that have come in, planners that have come in and helped us teach us how to do strategic planning, because it's an art to some degree. And so we took their knowledge and helped us do the things that we ultimately led in our 3-phase planning, after the merger. And then verification of key business functions, like I said, like health and safety, compliance with regulations, financial management, those sort of things. And generally, the district was pretty attentive to the process, I think. I think we did a good job of understanding what we didn't know and we needed help with, and then listened and participated with their process, and generally implemented the recommendations that they provided, making it reasonable, and the changes were not dramatic. And as you could see, there were 2 or 3 interpersonal relationship things, and they were as a result of a continuing maturation of the organization. So, we're dealing with more, adolescent issues, and then, we grow up a little bit, so we're dealing with more mature issues later on as an organization, and that was pretty much the result of that. But by and large, for most of the problem solving, we've continued to rely upon district staff to deal with the issues in that, with limited, they're using outside references, but not necessarily having them be in charge of the process. So example of that, again, going back to our 2014 ESIP, Milton and Dick stood up and took that responsibility. Now, we could have hired a consultant to manage our merger, and a lot of agencies do. I mean, there's some really large organizations out there that charge you a shitload of money to perform that function, and for very little cost, Milton and Dick stood up to the effort and produced that process, and I thought that was pretty neat. So, interesting enough, Dick did that as a sideline business too, so it wasn't entirely.
So he knew how to do it.
He did, he really did. So, anyway, there's some historical background. So really, the proof in the pudding as far as this process is defining what the need that you have as a customer. And so, what is it that we feel that we're not unable or are unable to do internally or by ourselves? So, looking at where we are today, are there problems lying in wait that we either know of or don't know of that we might suspect? So is there something out there that as an organization, we're either knowingly or unknowingly not dealing with? And most of the time, because of human nature, because we're trying to avoid it, because we don't know how or don't want to deal with it. So generally, are there things like that? Those are the sorts of things you need to consider as an organization, whether you want, quote, an expert to come in and help you deal with. So it's like I say here, you don't know what you don't know, but that's a little different than not recognizing or acknowledging those potential problems that you may need help in ferreting out and dealing with. So again, primary reason to have a outsider come in and do that. And then thinking about, are there risks that we have that aren't being addressed for some reason? I mean, are there procedures and policies and regulations and so forth that we have in plot process that are not effective, or ones that we don't have, controlling various things that we think we should? Do we have interpersonal relationship problems, that we need help in having somebody come in and help with? Are there, again, more technical, but administrative or financial or strategic processes that aren't being addressed adequately that we need help with? Others are trying to determine if whether or not we understand what our community risk is and whether we're meeting it or not. And then infrastructural soundness is more of a technical or an engineering appraisal of things, assets that we have, vehicles, facility and so forth. So again, it kind of boils down to the thing, is the district doing things right? Or are we doing the right thing? Big difference. I mean, we can have a script and follow it and say we're doing the right thing, but then it's the right way of building a buggy whip. Now, is that the right thing to do? Should we be thinking about automobiles or something like that? So it really is it's both, but it's primarily, are we doing the right thing? Does that make sense? So again, the whole point is try to find something into specific parameters so that you can put a finger on and say, this is what we need help on. So, we have to clearly describe what the issue or the interest is. What is it we want fixed? We also need to be sure that as we engage a third party, that we know what we want and we know when we get it, or are we getting the product that we're paying that provider to provide? Are there other ways of doing it? I mean, does it mean that we need to study the problem or do anything? Or are there options? For example, I use that, if there are things that risks that we can't mitigate, is by simply ensuring for them an adequate balance in risk management. So there may be other ways of dealing with a problem or suspected problem than dealing with it head on. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't either. And then the other thing that the district has tried to do, and I really believe this, is that bringing a consultant in, not to give us a solution, but to teach us how to solve the problem. So we have had that many times. In fact, Brandon reminded me when we had engaged a person to help us do our public outreach stuff and wanted to sell us a package deal. I mean, this vendor would have provided all the materials and do everything for us, hand us off a end product. And that's not what we wanted. We wanted to basically learn how she did it so we could do it ourselves. And frankly, the vendor didn't like that, but we had her do it. And I'm really glad, because I think that's what we needed and wanted. We got that case. So
Was that for this last campaign?
yeah.
That company, yeah.
Yeah. So, and I haven't heard from her since. I think she doesn't like this.
We've seen it once. We've seen it once.
So anyway, the other thing in thinking about that type of a process is, don't ask for something if you don't intend to be sincere about engaging in it. So we need to be willing and able to perform and assist in the process, and willing and able to follow up when we're done. So there needs to be a commitment by the whole organization, board, chief, staff, everybody, to sincerely be involved with it. Once we've made the decision, we want somebody to come in and tell us what to do. We need to be involved in that, or we're wasting our money and time and effort. So the district, for example, as a customer, we must be willing to evaluate, consider, and implement the recommendations. So, if we don't like the message we're getting back, are we willing to really consider that? If it's a vendor calling our baby ugly, maybe the baby is ugly and we need to deal with it. So, are we willing to take that bad medicine? And that's something you need to think about. Again, if we don't, then it's another waste of time, energy, and money. So, like I say, if you don't ask the question, and if you don't ask the question, if you don't want an answer. So, and then the district must be prepared on how to properly select the right consultant to come in and do it. I mean, open a phone book. I mean, there's lots of them, and from soup to nuts. And so it's important that you be very careful of selecting the individual who want to come in and provide that service, specifically to answer the well-defined question that you have. That's why you need to be very certain of what you want them to do, so you can evaluate that potential vendor's ability to provide that service. So, And it's three things. I mean, it's not always cost either. I mean, it may be a relationship that's been created from past things, the qualifications that a vendor might have. So there's several things that need to weigh in to selecting a consultant. And state rules for selecting consultants is fairly vague and gives us as a public agency the ability to consider not only price for a consultation service like that under our state purchasing rules. So really not a cost benefit, but a more just further consideration is the importance of all of this is determining the scope of work. I mean, that's the important thing. What is it we want somebody to do? And then being mindful of what the potential impacts of the resulting product will be. We need to, in advance, determine what the impacts of the study and the implementation of that will be. What are the costs involved and so forth from a vendor. And my experience has been generally the bigger they are, the more they're going to charge you because of the clientele. And us being a smaller organization, it probably bear the weight greater than, say, a Lacey or a Seattle would for a similar type of consultation. Determine the cost for internal impacts. If we're doing it right, we're going to have staff involvement, and that means that they're doing that and not other things that they would normally do. And that's an impact and a cost for the organization. Is the district willing to allow for that? So maybe payroll is a little slower, or trucks don't get fixed as fast or something like that. I don't know, but that is part of the consideration that we need to have. Obviously, contract costs. And then I think going into all of this, there has to be a sense of what the implementation impacts will be. And if we go in asking, where do we build, do we need another fire station? We need to be willing to accept the fact that they may come back and say yes, and then we're facing what the financial impact of building a new fire station. So if we're not willing to even consider that, why are we asking, them to do that process first? So I think there needs to be some awareness of what the potential outcome of a study might be before you even engage in it, And I know you won't know all the answers, but there just has to be some, thought process. Does that make sense? It's hard to convey. So anyway, at least for the third parties, the recommendation would be that the board really needs, I think, to have some thought on, are there issues that we're uncomfortable with? Are there interests out there? Are there things that don't seem resolved, or is there a problem out there? And if there is, then is it something that we need help in dealing with? So really, the first thing is identifying a potential issue or interest that could be handled through consultation like that. Then if there is something that we think needs to be dealt with, then you should I believe that you should begin to really clearly do the identification work and everything, and develop and identify that issue to a pretty clear degree. And I mentioned the SMART objective, that, really understanding what it is, how long it's been going on, how much we can do with it, is it feasible, those sorts of things, and really think about the issue or interest and describe it in interest so that everybody clearly understands in unison what that problem, issue, interest is. So it's well defined. And then really take a look at it and see, is this something that can be, the staff can handle, or we just choose not to deal with it? Or if we deal with it, is there a way of doing it? Then it would include an option, including having a third-party assessment. And then if it is appropriate, then, march ahead, have a plan, have a clear, like I say, a clear idea of what the issue or interest is. engage staff and have staff work on, obtaining an appropriate, an optimum, vendor to come in and provide that service. Have staff work with the vendor, when they get here, and then, be very clear about, making sure that we're getting our dollars worth when that vendor is providing that service, and then when they're provide the final report, that cheers to consider it and figure out how to implement it if necessary. So, it really, it's a good process. We've used it in the past for specific things. I think the message is that, be very clear of what it is we want a third party to do before we ask somebody to do it. That's my story, and I'm sticking with it. All right, questions?
Seems like all three of these issues, third-party assessment, the transport service, and the assessment of the volunteer program, kind of hinges on that excess line. Like, although we don't know where we're going unless we know what's gonna happen. So, you put this one right in that same category.
Any other comments, question? Well, it's fairly simple.
Well, yes. It's simple to discuss and it's always difficult to implement.
Detail out.
Well, detail out, yeah, and you do your best to provide a specific scope of work and objectives and this, that, and the other, and then that they always somehow don't understand what you said. And so there's always a frustration of, but you do have to work with them to try and make that understood about what it is you're trying to get, what your scope is and those kinds of things. It takes a lot of work to get a good outcome coming back.
Yeah, I, having worked for the state long enough to see some good examples, but probably more miserable examples of the process.
Right.
I love my story of I had a certain number of 3-ring binders sitting on a shelf for governor. And eventually it came back to where I could start reusing some of those 3-ring binders because it was all cyclical in nature. Okay. Regional Fire Authority. So a little bit of background, maybe some folks know, maybe some don't, I don't know, but what is an RFA? So it was new legislation in 2004, and it rode on the wave at that time of government consolidations. And if any of you remember, Mary Margaret Haugen was a senator of the state of Washington who was really high on streamlining government and consolidating agencies and so forth. And part of that was looking at all these 300 and some fire districts out in the state. And why do we need that many of them and cities and all that? So the notion of a regional fire protection service authority, which is the true name of it, really was stolen from the state of California, who had these for years. And basically took a lot of the verbiage that California had, embedded it in the changes to Title 52. And Title 52 being the statute that governs fire districts. So by no surprise, the legal nature of a RFA is a lot like a fire district, but it introduces some new players into it. And in the terminology of the statute, they're called fire protection jurisdictions. Now, public fire protection can be conducted by fire districts, but it can also be done by municipalities. The city of Olympia, for example, has a municipal department in their city government, it's fire department. So, and that is a function, separate function, and as different from a fire protection district. Towns, port districts have the authority to have fire protection functions as part of theirs, like CTAC.
Is Olympia the municipal, so they have their fire district is
City. No,
is city
yeah,
owned.
in the
Municipal
city of
state.
Olympia, they have, it's municipal government, they've got a
Okay.
mayor, city manager, and
Yeah.
council. But they have departments, police, fire, public works, so it's just another department within their city
So
government.
does Tumwater have the same thing?
Yeah.
Okay, because that's why the two are trying to.
Hold that thought.
Okay.
Hold that thought.
So I asked me a lot of questions here.
You just added.
So anyway, the legislation included a number of, including Indian tribes, which is a real interesting one. And I would tell you at this point, currently there are 15 in the state, none of them have approached or talked beyond city municipalities or fire districts. They haven't talked to port districts or Indian tribes yet. It'll be real interesting if and when somebody does it, because that opens up huge can of worms that hasn't even been thought about yet, but nonetheless, they're in the legislation. And that the various fire protection jurisdictions be coextensive. And I looked in Webster's dictionary to figure out what that word meant, and it was not very helpful. So,
What word are you saying?
what's that?
What word did you?
Coextensive.
Oh.
And so, the only thing that I'll say is the fact that the current RFAs in the state are touching each other, if you will. There aren't any that are separated by another jurisdiction in between. So the general feeling, while it isn't really very clear and hasn't been challenged, that they be coextensive means that they touch some fashion. So, or encompass, but they're physical, immediate connection between the various fire protection jurisdictions. The RFA is just like fire districts, municipal, political subdivision of the state of Washington. It has authority to tax, and it has authority for governance and everything else. So just similar, but not the same as fire district. There is still a few differences between the taxing authority of a RFA and a fire district. Fairly minor, and they're changing those, but. And that if an RFA is created, then the fire protection jurisdictions that are participating in that may be dissolved, and we'll talk about that. So, as I mentioned, there are currently 15 RFAs in the state, 2 in Thurston County. Again, the question of what coextensive is and what proximity is, and it's marvelously ambiguous, but most of the interpretation is that they, again, be touching. Scope of authorities, responsibilities are defined in the Regional Fire Protection Service Authority Plan. And we'll talk more and more about that, but the whole conversation about RFAs is really that RFA plan. That is the plan. Then I talked about dissolution, so on. Okay, so somebody deemed it was a great idea to do this for whatever reason. So how do we do it? How do we create one? So in this case, there needs to be an RFA planning committee formed. And what that means, it's a group of elected officials from the jurisdictions that are interested in participating in RFA create, and the statute provides how many and so forth. But it's a cluster of people that will get together, and their sole purpose is to create a plan, an RFPA plan. And that's the whole basis of it. The plan means everything. In fact, 90% of the Fire Protection Authority, RFA, is creation and approval of the plan. After that, it's auto-run, essentially. So again, I can't overemphasize the effort is
And it's elected officials, so it's
elected
like,
officials.
it would be
Like
like
city
us as a
council.
commissioner from each.
It has to
One
be, yes, it has to be elected officials from each of the jurisdictions.
Okay.
A certain number,
Yeah.
The planning, well, 3 elected officials appointed by the governing body. So 3 of you would go with 3 of Olympia, 3 of Lacey or something if we wanted to do that. So that's the planning committee. And then once the plan is complete, and we'll talk more about the plan, of course, but those governing bodies of those jurisdictions that have representatives on the plan must certify the plan. and put it on the ballot. The plan needs to be approved by the voters of all of the participating agencies. So, and voters can either approve or reject it. And, and it can be done by a single ballot measure. So for all of the participating agencies would have a ballot measure at that time. And it would be on a simple majority. And the interesting thing in the RFA that I wasn't clear about was it is the majority of the combined populations, all of the,
All
agencies.
the ones participating in that.
so obviously the largest agency would have the greatest leverage on passing or failing the approval of the plan.
So when you say the plan, what would the plan consist of?
Oh, hold that up. The only bringer is that if the plan includes a provision for fire benefit charge, which is a funding mechanism, it's in Title 52, that, and I'll be very simple about this, is a way of charging a fee rather than a tax, and that's still under debate, for people that live in a defined higher risk to pay a higher rate or a fee to the agency up and above the base tax level. So an example of that would be, so I own an asbestos factory, and if they have a fire benefit charge, asbestos factories are determined to be a higher fire risk or something like that, I could be charged a fire benefit charge fee that would be higher than what somebody else would pay, like a single family resident. So that's a whole miasma we don't want to get into right now, and I think they're a huge mistake, but they exist. But if the plan includes the fact that you need a fire benefit or want a fire benefit charge in the plan, it requires supermajority vote then in that same ballot.
But you could do an RFA 1 year, have it happen, and then ask for a separate thing another year.
Yeah, still the fire but it would, you could do that, yes,
Yeah.
I'll just say that. And then there's a requirement that the former participating or the participating jurisdiction must have a formal review every 10 years. So the governing board
When you
is,
say they have a review every 10 years, is what do they determine in that review?
whether they're meeting the provisions of the plan. Part of the plan may be performance measures. We reduce response time. Do we, it's up to the plan to decide what the things that are reviewed every 10 years are. Again, it's up to the plan.
So it could, yeah, sort of like private business mergers or something where at grocery stores or something, well, we'll have benefit to our customers, it's gonna be lower prices because we've got larger purchasing ability now or something like that. And so you'd review it in 10 years and say, did we provide that lower cost to customers compared to what would?
Yeah, could be that, yeah. The governing board is determined by the plan. The plan will decide what sorts of representation we have for formal governance. The statute is not terribly clear, but it would include, of course, elected officials, presumably from all of the participating jurisdictions. They would be voted on and would be, their terms would be defined in the plan and so forth. And for example, in an Indian tribe or a port district who've not been included in any of our RFA in the state yet, would have to have elected officials too. So for example, the elected port commissioner, if there is one, would be the rep to that RFA. It could be the executive director could not be on the governance committee. And
Can't be the chief.
And I don't know how tribal government is, but it would have to be an elected official from that tribe to participate in the RFA, not their business manager. And then, like I say, the plan must establish the terms of the elected official's office. with certain control. They can't have a 20-year term. I think it can be 6-year term like fire district, or it could be something less. RFA, the powers that RFA have are defined in the plan. And the thing is that the misconception is that a RFA plan is for everything. It doesn't have to be. If, for example, an RFA could be created simply to provide EMS. So, for example, we could create an RFA with Lacey and Olympia, simply provide EMS and continue to have District 3 and 8 and City of Olympia does continue to do fire, but EMS would be provided in those 3 jurisdictions by the RFA. So, or it could be fire prevention, or it could be all of it or none of it or whatever. So it isn't an all or nothing option.
Yeah, so if, for example, so if we said could be a EMS thing. So if they decided to do transports through that, then would the RFA buy the proper equipment and our department would not have to buy the equipment?
That would be up to the plan.
Okay,
Yeah, we contract for services. If you wanted, let's say, somebody wanted to get rid of logistics, you contract that through the RFA logistics, it'd be part of that plan, and you have to, purchase a contract with them, or training division, whatever that looks like. It's scalable. You can have that RFA at any kind of level, full kit and caboodle, or just a couple of entities within your own department.
because that doesn't Medic One basically contract to be in like
No.
Olympic ambulance, and they just have stations?
The only contracts in Medic One's case are contracts with 3 different agencies to provide ALS service. That's
But
the only-
aren't they based out of some of the fire stations? No, they're based out of their own.
But they pay, for example, for Medic One,
Yeah.
which is, it's not an RFA or anything. It's a separately funded county agency.
Okay,
But the service is delivered by contract, and what Medic One does is contract with Lacey Fire Department to provide staff. And the contract says it will pay for 80% of that FTE to provide that service. We'll pay 80% for vehicles or some percentage, but
okay,
it's all under contract. They pay the fire district, they pay Olympia, and they pay Tumwater to provide that service and deliver it from these stations. So
okay,
in Lacey's case, they've actually got 4, one that's sitting out in Yelm.
okay.
But Medic One pays that through contract directly to and Lacey is a contractor for that service, and Medic One through the MS levy, 31 cents per thousand, pays for it.
Okay.
So the Board of County Commissioners and Medic One are basically middlemen in the tax money collected at the county and the service delivered at the fire district on behalf of the county.
I understand.
In the case, in the example that I said before about RFA doing all that, actually, it's not a contractual relation, it's a governmental relationship. So based how if the plan in it is all, again, all defined by the plan, would actually take money away from Fire District 8, put it in the account of the RFA to provide those services. So there's no contractual relationship.
Okay,
Could be, but not necessarily, that we lose some of our taxing ability to pay that would go towards the RFA to provide those services as agreed to by participating agencies. And as I'm not aware of any RFAs that have done any partial work like that.
Mhm.
Most of it's been all in, but it is possible that you could do that. I don't know if that makes sense.
no, it makes sense, because by you saying that, if say we were to do something like that with Lacey, then we're losing some of our tax dollars that would be able to man our stations. That's how I'm understanding it. Because, is it?
Yeah, that's definitely right, but you're also gaining a lot out of that too. Like, a good example is what Seth Yelm and East Ole are doing right now too. So Chief King's at Yelm, but he is also the chief at East Ole.
Mhm.
The chief operations, Chief Denton, is doing operations for both East Ole and Yelm.
Mhm.
So they're kind of joining forces that way, just chunking away at this, chipping away at this, trying to build a bigger entity and becoming more efficient.
Okay,
So instead of paying 4 chiefs for doing two different jobs, they're paying two for the same thing.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's by contract. One of the things I know that Yelm and East Olympia are looking at is incorporating District 6 into Yelm's RFA, if you will, to formalize all of that. But could be like Lacey did for years. There was a contract between the city of Lacey and Fire District 3 to provide fire protection. And then they chose at some point, fortunately, to allow by vote, the district then by vote incorporated the city. So really, it forced the city out of any responsibility for fire protection. It was all accepted by the fire district then. And all of the city was incorporated into the fire district. That makes sense. So there's a lot of ways to skin a cat.
When we were trying to figure out what to do for a battalion chief program, one of the ideas is, hey, well, what if we do the RFA part for Command of Lacey and say, well, then we don't even have to hire battalion chiefs. If there's a big enough fire, then Lacey would come out and do it. It would just be whatever amount of dollars we could do. Then that would be the RFA. Then we'd just have company officers, not have to have a BC.
Okay.
That would have been one of the different ways we could have gone. We decided not to do that, but could have been.
Their water rescue program is a good idea. Like, we have a ton of bodies of water out here. Well, contract through that RFA and utilizing District 3's water rescue program to have an entity out here respond with water rescue calls, because they happen out here too. Which is, it's an efficiency of work.
So anyway, again, any power and authority is defined under the plan, legal authority is defined by the plan. And you can transfer all or some or none of your responsibilities, your authorities, your employees. Again, it's all defined by the plan. There are provisions for withdrawal and annexations or re-annexations of territories, dissolutions and so forth. One of the things that happened in our two RFAs we have in this county, one is Yelm or Southeast Thurston, and the other is West Thurston. In the case of Southeast Thurston, they chose to dissolve fire districts 2 and 4, and they no longer exist legally. And for various reasons, West Thurston chose to maintain the legal structure of District 1 and District 11, who were primarily the participating for that West Thurston jurisdiction. So you can do it either way. I mean, it's up to the plan if you have.
Yeah.
And then, the revenue and the debt and everything are pretty much the same as what a fire district have in current statute. Yeah, here are the two that we currently have. Everybody knows about the attempt by the cities of Olympia and Tumwater to create a separate RFA. And the bottom line is, well, one, that they were not successful in doing that, but there was a number of things that were inherently unknown that weren't, in my opinion, adequately addressed. One was the notion of the fire benefit charge, which they had as part of the ballot measure, which required supermajority approval. And they didn't achieve, I guess they achieved it in one.
So they ran it together
But-
in one.
Pardon?
They ran that.
Yes,
simple
and you could
majority.
do that, yeah. Their plan included the fact that they were going to use a fire benefit charge to help fund that new RFA. And my opinion is that's what sank that proposal. The other is the fact, and interestingly enough, was that they were both city governments, because they were coming from a municipal department, didn't have the internal capability for the administrative functions and support functions the fire districts do, because we're a separate unit of government. We're not part of something else necessarily, so we have to pay our own bills, we have to maintain our own equipment, we have to hire and fire people and all of that. And a separate department within a municipal government doesn't have that. They're dependent upon City Hall to provide those services.
Yeah.
And when you move that department from the municipal government, which effectively an RFA would do, the administrative support that we were getting from that city doesn't go along with that necessarily. I mean, they could include that in the plan, but Olympia and Tumwater didn't do that. So they have all of this infrastructure that they had to build under their plan
Yeah.
to do all of those services that they didn't have. So that was another major complication that they had. Now, if, for example, if they had tried to do a merger between Olympia and Lacey, for example, or Fire District 3 specifically, it would have been a little different because District 3 has that infrastructure, and Olympia portion of the RFA could absorb that. But between Olympia and Tumwater, they didn't have that. So that was a major fail, I think, for that plan, so. It was, anyway, it is what it is, so. But anyway, we do have 2 RFAs in the county. And like was mentioned earlier, the Southeast is looking at potential of incorporating Fire District 6 into their current RFAs. There are benefits, obviously. You know, one of the things, the miracle of this, and going back to the plan, is that within legal boundaries, you can make it be anything you want. And what a wonderful opportunity to do a blank slate design of a new organization. And basically, the RFA process allows you to do that. Again, within legal boundaries, but if we have a department that's not functioning well for whatever reason, through the creation of the plan, we can address those issues and address it for all of the participants to the benefit of all of them like that. So planning process offers a real great opportunity to redesign the department that you want to have provide that function. And yes, it's very complicated. Yes, it's very time consuming and everything else. But again, that's one of the great values of the importance of the planning process is really doing it at the time of the work, not having to count on all the old baggage that was involved with the participants and everything, literally redesign the whole thing, build a new house, is a real value, I think, potential benefit in the process. Obviously, the inclusion of participants into an RFA, you bring the strengths and admittedly the weaknesses of organizations, depending on how the plan defines them, but really have a larger pool of resources at your availability and being able to manage them differently, for example. It gives you an economy, could give you an economy of scale, that you have a larger organization, you're able to do some things that as the separate agencies were not able to do for some reason.
So the RFA then, say Lacey and South Bay wanted to do an RFA. How much difference, I mean, okay, it could be a portion
Hold that thought.
or it could be the whole thing, and then he's finished.
Yeah.
Or what's the difference of that to a merger?
Hold that thought. Please.
Am I ahead of you on all of this?
Huh?
My brain thinks a little faster.
Oh, that's fine, that's fine.
You need to increase your baud rate, maybe.
One of the things that in a complete redesign is you may decide how to change the resources, redeploy them or reuse them in the newer RFA construct. So again, the whole value of this is being able to take all of this, look at it, decide you want to do things differently and incorporate it in the plan and then of course get full approval for it. But to really significantly redesign how you're going to do business. One of the advantages for a city or a town is that they can take a portion of the money that they're collecting in their city coffers, primarily property tax, and then with an agreed upon amount, basically sell their fire department and be out of the business. And that was a big driver for the city of Tumwater, for example, at least under the city administrator they had at the time. The city simply just didn't want to be in the business. And a great way of doing that is pushing it off somewhere else. And cities can do that if they chose to. And then, like I say, I don't know whether it's a can of worms or not, but involving port districts with their legal capabilities and things, and certainly Indian tribes, interestingly enough, how you could lever an advantage with RFA in that case,
Yeah,
I
because
really
the
don't know.
guys don't pay
Huh?
into the tax structure.
We build it for a call at this point. But
Say what?
we build our the Nisqually tribe for a call for the residential.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're still trying to work out a contract which has been in the works for decades to get them at the casino.
Yeah.
If we respond to the residents, one of the residential homes, we charge about $1,500 per call, kind of like the numbers that you drew.
Okay,
And that's relatively new in the last 4 or 5 years.
okay.
So it's like the contract.
Yeah, because you guys can deal with that.
Yeah, it is like pulling fingernails to get any kind of revenue from. But it's a responsibility as a.
Yeah.
Take care of the responsibility.
She's doing the same thing.
How many calls do you go to the Redland?
Oh, I think it's significantly reduced since we charge them for a call. But it's about, it's 32 has about a 700 call out there.
Wow.
700?
Are they all from Lacey or is there some from Yelm? too?
Yeah, 34 is the response area.
Oh, okay.
The problem is, probably the nature of the tribe is that they're a sovereign government. So they're not subject to the WAC statutes and everything for the state. They're controlled literally by the federal government. And it's really not clear what the nature of a contract, if it's binding or not. It is really a sticky wicket, actually. So I don't know that you'll ever see an Indian tribe incorporated into an RFA. Maybe they will. I don't know. So some of the impacts for creating an RFA would be depending on how the plan outlines it, some participants that currently receive an acceptable level of service may not. If the plan says that we're going to shift, all of the troops that are stationed at South Bay will be relocated in downtown Olympia, the citizens in the South Bay area would suffer from that plan. I mean, but it's a potential that in the quote optimization of resources, some people could suffer from a level that they may have had pre-RFA on that. So it's just one of the things that would need to be considered and dealt with in a plan. One thing I can guarantee, though, under that, the collective bargaining agreement for any bargaining unit staff would be increased because simply the comps would increase significantly when you get to the point to where you're bargaining wages and benefits, that sort of thing. So, I mean, that's, and if labor is 80% of your budget, then that could be a considerable cost and it needs to be considered when you talk about these things. Obviously, you've got a larger agency, you're going to have larger government, and it gets more complicated than that, and you're going to have the vagaries of, while you may not have duplication, you still have work to be done, and that means that maybe rather than the guys at 3 different agencies, you're going to have it done by one, but it doesn't mean that the number of people doing it are going to change. So it may be under one paycheck, but the same amount of work will probably be done, and maybe in some cases more will need to be done, depending on how the plan outlines how business is done and everything. So one of the potentials is what the growth of that governance would be. And then there are, like I mentioned before, the problem with two cities trying to form an RFA is that they're not bringing along that overhead that built into the organization like a fire district would have. So anyway, I think that hopefully understanding that, I think we need to think about that. You know, we considered an RFA when we talked about the merger between 7 and 8. And in that case, it didn't pencil out. Complete mergers are probably the simplest solution by combining governments. Technically, a district can't merge with a city, so if we wanted to involve a city or municipality in this, we would have to either follow the contract methodology that Lacey and the city of Lacey and District 3 had for many, many years. You'd have,
Lacey, you're not a municipality, are you?
We're district.
Okay.
or incorporate a city within a fire district, or go through an RFA process.
So with Olympia, we would be absorbing them.
Well, I mean, it's possible. I mean, if the voters, if a plan was created and there was a need for it, I mean, yeah. There's nothing legally preventing it. And I think the bottom line really is your interest by our neighborhood because of the notion of coexistence or how we're located. We really don't have any eligible partners rather than Fire District 3 in the city of Olympia. I mean, we could like to merge with West Thurston, but it's not practical and it's probably
'cause they're
not legal.
They're
So
not
we,
connected to us.
by law, we probably could merge with Harstein Island because we touch, our legal
Waters.
boundaries touch, but
Our water's
logistically, well, I mean, there's a line out in the middle of the
Yeah.
harbor out there, the Puget Sound, but it's not practical.
Well, I look at it as if we were to do a RFA, like, we're on two bodies of water, basically, and so, but we don't have a water rescue thing. So to me, if we were to do something like that, it'd be smart to go with Lacey because they already have a water rescue in place, kind of deal. So, I mean, that's something future down the road, as this area grows more and more, people are voting more and more, something that needs to be
That would definitely be in
addressed.
the plan.
Yeah,
It allows our current members the ability to be on that team as well. So we
Yeah.
can take the overhead for the training and we, have an extension of that we have here.
yeah,
And I'll just speak to Lacey's behalf here, but so we already share the same local 2903. We're both already districts, so there's already two layers.
Yeah, right.
And currently where we stand, we're already asking our taxpayers for $1.50 per assessed thousand for both entities.
yeah,
And like this plan can be 4 or 5 years out. It isn't something we have to be rushed into, because there's, like Chief said, a lot of layers that come with this. It's a ton of it, but it's a consolidation of resources. I mean, the benefits that we reap at Lake Fire District 3 can be extended out to South Bay. Paramedic programs, I mean, all the individual assistant chiefs that are out there for training and logistics, so these separate entities that control all this stuff, that would be absorbed by South Bay. So there's a lot of really good benefits. There's also a lot of really kind of downsides as well. We essentially could be losing the South Bay brand, could be losing a lot of its overhead, we could be changing positions around. Some of the people that have grown up here running calls might have to go out and 31 or 1 calls, and all this stuff has to be accounted for and thought through. And there's a lot of lessons here that the different agencies outside of us that we can reach out to and ask them what went right, what went wrong, what's the best way to go moving forward. It's a common practice that you see up and down the I-5 corridor, and a lot of these smaller departments like this size that are getting absorbed by these larger ones, because there's just a lot of benefits for the taxpayers and the people that they serve.
Yeah, I think, again, this kind of goes back to the unique nature that we have. We are frankly a island of rural in the midst of this county's urban core, and sort of like it's out of character. So by that same stroke, that really the only reasonable participants we could see is either District 3 or Olympia. So frankly, the bottom line is if we should be, I think, keep that well, first, I think we need to understand what an RFA is or isn't. And I hope that I help instruct that a little bit. But are there's certainly advantages and disadvantages. But is there any interest by the neighbors to even think about or talk about these things? So, if it's an interesting topic, I would encourage at the elected level, have a cup of coffee with the electeds from those, either or both of those agencies. Or you ever thought about this thing or anything? But, if they're not, then it's really a non-starter, to be honest with you.
right.
And then, if there is interest, then we need to follow, and then engage in that process. And the proof is in the pudding with what the plan ends up being, and obviously voter approval of it afterwards. So really, that's all I know about RFAs. So
Thanks. Yeah, that last part, really education.
Derek, do you have any thoughts on an RFA? Because, I mean, if something were like that to happen, that would personally affect the staff. And,
I mean,
Depends on how you write it.
yeah.
It
I don't
depends
have
on what-
any
how you
official
write it.
concept.
yes, exactly, but I mean, it's like, That's where something like, if something like that would happen, I think it would be something as us as a board would need to sit down with the staff themselves and say, Mayor Way, do you, depending on what, you know, partial, full, if we ever wanted to do something like this, because you can't go approach Lacey and say, if we don't have people here that say, we just don't want this, I mean, we'll quit, we'll go someplace else, then you're stuck with no staff, you know, so I just look at it as us as a department, us as a board we can make a decision, but we need to talk to the staff and say, what are your views on this?
Generally, like you see, in the training division, we work with a lot of Pierce County departments. And generally, when those two combine in other departments, like the battalion chiefs from South Bay would be integrated as battalion chief in the other department.
Okay.
Whether South Bay standards are higher than Lacey's, then we have to find some common ground. So if he's missing a fire officer two, for example, that would be a condition of his employment a year or two, or however you write it up. Or if one of our people are missing certification, that South Bay makes their people do it, we have to come up with that standard. So all that stuff would be written down in the plan of what those positions look like, a lieutenant, two lieutenant, firefighter, to firefighter, battalion chief, admin to admin. And so we all kind of meet that same standard and have little numbers.
Those are all things that will be included in the planning process.
From the staff level, the absence of information provides people the opportunity to think of the worst case scenario. And that's-
Right. Right,
And that's the best thing I can give you guys.
okay,
So.
good advice.
There's strength in numbers like that. As far as the union is concerned, you grow your union, like Chief Metcalf was alluding to, you grow your bargaining power with a larger, so firefighters are making more money, they have more employment opportunities, they have more professional development growth. They have more programs which they're initiated to, but we just sent 3 people to paramedic school, took them off the line for a year, so it allows that opportunity for South Bay members. If one of our 3rd-year South Bay members is interested in joining the special operations team, SOAR team, or the water rescue team, or some kind of leadership team, all of those options are available to those members as well.
If it's in the plan.
If it's in the plan.
Okay, well,
It's definitely something to think about, you know.
so I guess the last thing that I have, are there any follow-up items that you would expect from me based on what we've just talked about, or just food for thought, or what?
Yeah, I think you did a really good job presenting all this. I think some of these ideas have come up in previous, and you clarified things on a lot of stuff that we always were like,
Y'all,
no.
would you all like copies of the slides then, or?
I'm not gonna need a copy of the slide, because it's all pretty much in this book, isn't it?
No, that's a dominant handout.
This is what?
That's not, that is not the.
That's the master plan documents.
That was the merger master plan.
Yeah,
Right.
well, it's all of our master plan documents.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't, I have slides for the 4 topics.
Yeah, I'd like to just
Okay,
have.
well, I'll send them all to you all.
Yeah. And just as a review to look at it and sort of rewrap the head around it.
This will be posted.
So.
What was I looking at this? This is what the draft was that Chief sent to us on what we were gonna talk about here. Yes, so this was that draft that you sent out, so that's what I was,
That was an early draft, yeah.
yeah, early draft of sort of what the ideas that you came up with and then talked about, so I just, on the transport one is the one that I was always questioning why we should or shouldn't do it, and so I like that you gave us that much information that makes it really clear. I'd say that's the least on the list, you know, for us to do, because we don't have the staffing to do it.
I don't think so.
Yeah, we just don't have the staffing to do that.
Well, I guess I'd like to propose that we just sit on this, pin on this, because we got a pretty big vote coming up.
Yeah,
And maybe we just take the next couple months and just
Yeah.
review all this information, worry about that excess levy vote that's coming up here.
yeah,
Wait till that vote happens, yea or nay, and then we come back to the table in October after that vote, and then we start
yeah,
really kind of diving into these as options, or where we're looking at for staffing, and we're looking at for all the other things that come with it.
Yeah. yeah, it's just sort of an information thing and then on hold for right now. Sounds good.
All right, you good with that, Dan?
I'm good.
Okay. All right.
Pam, did you?
No, that would do it, because I was just saying, is this it, or are we gonna come back and look at pros and cons, and is that something we want to look into or not, so that's. We're waiting,
Yeah, I
Wait,
think
it's-
there's, yeah, articulation that Jake
yeah.
provided, okay. That's
Yeah.
kind of where we're all at, yeah, I would agree.
I think we're all on the same page.
Okay. Can't think enough.